Welcome to the Equity Conscious Leader, a new generation equity podcast and YouTube channel where we chat with leaders about tangible system change and strategies to advance and sustain equity work in their organizations. Our conversations dive deep into the 6 dimensions of equity conscious leadership. So how do you lead with transformational system change for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Let's find out on this episode of the Equity Conscious Leader with your host and educational equity leader, Dr. Jag Lathan.
And when I think about some of the work around like collectivism, like how groups work together, like for children, of course, it is how they work together. It is not this silo, and the individualism is definitely a product of white supremacy culture. Like that is what it's about. It's like, how can I get there on my own individually? And what you and I are really talking about is the notion of we can't do it alone. We need to do it together, but we also can't do the same thing that we've already done together, right? Like, because that doesn't work either. So how do we then become like innovative in our thinking and doing more research and really trying on? So thinking about those cycles of inquiry. So it's I'm moving kind of to like what we actually do in teams that makes a difference. So we already talked about creating the space, creating structures. We haven't talked about community agreements, but I'll just kind of throw that out there in terms of teams in the beginning, in that forming stage. When you think about Tuckman's stages of team development, is really so how do we come to agreement about how we're going to work together? That's really important too. So I just want to kind of throw a plug out there. Interrupt me if you want to jump in.
Well, but what I want to say about that, and you and I have actually had this right conversation about. I have a big issue with norms because I feel like if we're actually not practicing them, then it's just a performative task. And I've seen a lot of groups do that, especially when they go to things like we're going to start on time, no cell phones out. I'm like, really? Like that's how you want to be together? Um, and I will also participate in the creation of norms. But again, it goes back to the same thing as a definition of equity. When I break a norm, how is the group going to hold me accountable? And do we? We don't. So it becomes this performative like shrine, but are we really living into that? And that's the part that gets really difficult. And then again, it goes into power and fear and psychological safety. Because I know even when I've pressed on, actually, we were working together in the same organization. And I remember being in a meeting thinking, I have to interrupt what's being said, but I don't have the psychological safety within this group to do so. So I'm going to lean on one of the norms. And I literally used a norm as a sentence starter, and some people caught that and some people didn't. And so again, like these are norms we all created, but we're actually not living into them. So I agree with you, they're necessary. And then I also think, how does a group hold them the entire time so that we're actually living into those norms? Otherwise, it doesn't
Yes, and
matter.
then engaging in conversations and figuring out a way to repair when community agreements
Mhm.
or norms are breaking down. So those are
Yes,
important.
that is good.
I just want to,
Yes.
as you know, for our listening audiences are thinking about like, how do we actually form this group? How do we get people together towards a common goal? And that is one strategy. And for it to not live as wallpaper on your wall, but actually check in with them, use them all the time, and get a pulse in terms of how are people able to actually really share and not just be vulnerable, but take risks, right? Risks around innovative thinking, risks around interrupting inequities that you see in power dynamics, even within the group. And not just so that everyone is on equal ground. That's really important, but ultimately it's about moving the work forward. And if we start playing those games of this group of people have more power in the group than this group, the women have to sit back and be a little more quiet. The people of color can't really say what's on our mind, right? When we notice certain things, then that's not going to really help in terms of getting true work done.